I can remember weeping when I heard the prophet's life story, thinking about how difficult it must have been for a young boy to help feed his widowed mother and his 10 siblings after the death of his father, Charles Branham. It came as a great surprise when a message brother and sister told me that they found Charles Branham's death certificate in the archives, and that he passed away over 15 years later. I had never thought about the fact that different versions of the life story placed the death of his father at very different points in the prophet's timeline. In my mind, I had reconciled the different versions by unknowingly choosing the earliest point mentioned, as a child, in the log cabin, so early in his life that he quit school at 7th grade. Knowing that the prophet's father was working for Wathen using a whiskey still, and had taken the prophet out of school to help run it, all during a time that Wathen was distributing illegal liquor to the mob, while passing medicinal license inspections, made my head spin. How did he pull this off? It made me curious about the local Jeffersonville scene during the time that all of this was happening. Reading through the newspaper archives, I found that the presence of the mob had quickly changed things for the worse. All across Louisville and southern Indiana, the local authorities were turning a blind eye to the gambling and speakeasies that were springing up on every corner. Local liquor and gambling nightlife attracted all kinds of shady people from cities where liquor was unavailable, and the town of Jeffersonville was quietly being invaded by criminals. Local law enforcement could barely keep up with maintaining order as a growing mob took control. Citizens and city council noticed that the police were turning a blind eye and tried helplessly to stop it. Louisville, Kentucky, just across the river from Jeffersonville, Indiana, was no different. The Seelbach Hotel hosted many people that Wathen did business with, some of them now famous criminals in American history. Al Capone, the head of the Chicago Mafia, frequented the Rathskeller room in the basement of the Seelbach Hotel, and escaped federal agents through a network of underground tunnels. Capone and others like him slipped easily in and out of Jeffersonville and Louisville, conducting business, ensuring that their supply lines remained operational. As their power continued to grow, so did the demand for their product. To keep up with the increasing demands of whiskey production, Wathen worked with an underground network of whiskey suppliers. Local men in the counties surrounding Jeffersonville and Louisville installed whiskey stills on their private property and produced large volumes of illegal liquor off the books, leaving only the medicinal whiskey for government inspection. While the prohibition officers monitored the legal production of liquor for medicinal purposes, men working with Wathen were secretly producing whiskey and white mule moonshine for drinking, all operating in the supply chain of the mob. At one point, government agents suspected that Wathen's network had grown into a $200,000 illegal liquor ring associated with Wathen's Granddad Distillery. It was during this time, shortly before the raids by federal agents, that the Branham family moved away from Wathen on Utica Pike. As federal agents began to crack down on Wathen's operation, Charles Branham moved his family to a small house in the Brighton neighborhood of Jeffersonville, and he purchased a plot of land just outside the city. Federal agents traced every path leading to the liquor ring, and they discovered Charles Branham's liquor still. Whiskey prices had more than doubled during Prohibition in the United States. Charles could produce a gallon of whiskey for up to $25. One batch of whiskey would gain him $250 during a time in history when the average wage was under $1.50 per hour. When Charles Branham was arrested, he was working in one of the local factories. While he was working, a prohibition officer from New Albany, Indiana, and a local police officer raided the family's home. They uncovered a 10-gallon liquor still hidden under a large pile of fodder, a coil, and a barrel of mash. Officers immediately arrested Charles in the factory and took him to the local jail. His arrest came at a very difficult time for the family. The prophet had been shot, allegedly, while hunting. One of his brothers had a broken arm, and another brother was near death due to a neck injury. According to the newspaper reports, the family was without food, and their case was sent over to the city's official trustees for help for charity. The property used for his participation in the whiskey ring was owned by Edwin M. Coots. Mr. Coots was a well-known name among Message believers. The Coots Funeral Home is used by many families during the times of family members' deaths. Coots immediately filed for an eviction notice. The court proceedings made it very evident that Charles Branham was working with Otto H. Wathen in the underground network of whiskey production. When Charles had his day in court, the judge sentenced Charles to 30 days in jail, a $100 fine, and court costs. Otto H. Wathen presented the money for Charles' release, but the court refused to suspend the jail sentence. Just days after Charles Branham's arrest, the Fiery Cross, a Ku Klux Klan newsletter from Indianapolis, announced that almost all the evidence leading to liquor indictments had been secured by members of the Ku Klux Klan.